to go to our Chief Global Affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz, now, who's been keeping track of this investigation in general. Martha, we heard from Alex Mallon just a little while ago that there was a new arrest of someone who's suspected of having been a part of that mob that stormed the Capitol. What's the latest on the investigation and the efforts to not only secure the Capitol, but the country?
Well, the latest arrest was of a man who appeared in a hoodie and a sweatshirt that said Camp Auschwitz. He has been arrested in Newport News, Virginia. They are fanning out all across the country in truly every state because, as we know, people came from all across the country. And we've now learned, a defense official has told us that there will be as many as 20,000 National Guard deployed to Washington, D.C. by this weekend because they believe that the trouble is going to start again even before the inauguration. There were several petitions for protests. Those have been denied because we are in a national emergency in Washington, D.C., but they are already, as you can see, filling the streets and certainly around the Capitol. I think a real question is the so-called rules of engagement. What can they do? We saw one of the rioters in Capitol shot and killed trying to breach a door, break through a door and climb over others, and there were members on the other side of that door. Now, the only thing the Guard will tell us is what's obvious. They can shoot someone in self-defense, but many of those guards, certainly the ones at the Capitol, will be armed. They were not armed on Wednesday. They were merely doing traffic control with law enforcement. National Guard are, of course, civilians, citizen soldiers. They come from their homes and their regular jobs to help out. They are only really trained one weekend a month or a couple of weeks in the summer. So their training in riot situations is not nearly as vast as law enforcement officials. So when they get in these situations, I would imagine that if a line is breached and they are protecting a member or they're protecting someone else, they will be able to respond with those arms. But it is always a really tricky situation, and you certainly don't want to fire a weapon when there are a whole bunch of other people around that you might in fact hurt. So this is going to be tricky, but just in terms of those numbers, 20,000 National Guard. Right now in Iraq, 2,500 Army soldiers, and in Afghanistan, 2,500 active duty military, and that's a distinction. You saw me pause there for a second. Those are active duty military in those countries, so 5,000 total, but 20,000 citizen soldiers taking the streets of Washington, D.C. You guys all know this is a pretty small town. You feel it when you drive in. I know our troops on the Hill today are astounded at the number of Guard, and they look a lot like, I mean, I was there Wednesday in the city. They did not have tactical gear on. They aren't wearing helmets. They're wearing soft caps there, but they do have their tactical gear on. It's a whole different look. It looks a lot more the way it looked after the Black Lives Matter protests began, lining up at the Lincoln Memorial, protecting other things throughout the city. And of course, very controversial because last week, a whole different dynamic and so few people out on the streets and not nearly enough protecting the Capitol.
And we were, as you were speaking, we're seeing some of the images of those National Guard members actually napping inside the Capitol because that's how long their shifts are right now. That's how many of them are currently stationed in the Capitol as we speak. And Martha, we're hearing that the Speaker herself.
Go ahead. I'm looking at those pictures, and those look so much like deployment pictures, like pictures from Iraq and Afghanistan, because I know active duty and National Guard and journalists, you work so hard and so late during those hours, you will just nap wherever you possibly can. And again, these men and women came from all over the place. I don't know where they would grab a nap otherwise inside the building there. And Nancy Pelosi, I know you were going to just say this, sorry to interrupt you. Nancy Pelosi did go out and meet with some of the members of the National Guard. There you see her there, talked to them, and I'm sure thanked them for what they are doing, and sort of a thanks for keeping us safe, and we certainly hope that is the case.
And Martha, first of all, you can always feel free to interrupt me. But second off, I hear you talking about Iraq and Afghanistan. You have traveled the world. You have been in war zones. You have covered uprisings. You were also on the ground that day when this insurrection happened at the U.S. Capitol. Put us in your mindset. What did you think when you saw that happening here in the United States?
Well, I think you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, that was the difference. When you're in a war zone and you're with the U.S. military, you feel you're a team, you're protected in some ways. Here, it is so unbelievable to see attacks by fellow Americans on the Capitol. That is what was so stunning. And the most dangerous place you can be is in the middle of a frenzied mob and be a target. I mean, to hear fellow Americans, and I've heard it at Trump rallies. All of our reporters who covered Trump rallies have heard it. To me, it was more theater at those Trump rallies before. This was not theater. These were real attacks. They were really attacking the Capitol. They were attacking journalists. And both of those things are what President Trump has talked about ceaselessly since he became president, that we are the enemy of the people. And go to the Capitol. That's what this is all about. That's what this impeachment hearing is all about right now. And I rarely like to talk about, I rarely bring up the attacks on journalists and what he's been saying for 4 years, because we don't really like to make it about us. But there was a palpable difference that day on the Hill. You truly felt like people were targeting you as well. And of course, I know there were some very brave photographers, New York Times photographer, for example, inside the building who was attacked and thrown down and cameras smashed. That all happened on American soil. And that is what's so disturbing. But you do not want to be by a frenzied mob like that. My instincts definitely kicked in that day to try to be careful and to try to back up.
And I'm glad to hear it, Martha, because this is something we haven't heard a ton about as far as the events last week. But we did hear in the security briefing yesterday from the FBI and the acting AG in D.C. that there were attacks on the media that happened that day.
Oh, there definitely were. And, by name, it's very personal. I would certainly tell my colleagues to be very careful in a situation like that and just turn and walk away. That is not where you should try to be particularly brave. A frenzied mob where they're after you, turn around and walk away or do whatever you can. And I know we had some terrific security people with us who were helpful as well in those situations. But it is a frightening and dangerous situation, and we all continue to be very careful.
And Martha, I know you're also watching the day's proceedings unfold. What's it like for you, having been there, to listen to these Congress members on both sides of the aisle having to vote in an impeachment where they're also, in a way, acting as witnesses to the crime that they are alleging against the president?
Well, I think, the very evening, last Wednesday evening, when they resumed with the certification of the electors, that was a moment of pride that everybody went back to work. They didn't let those rioters, those insurrectionists, those who desecrated our Capitol take over and disrupt democracy. They went ahead and did it. So to hear about this, it is still, things move so quickly. It is still extraordinary to look at what's happening today. Remember, a year ago, we were in another impeachment hearing. I was in New York at the time watching the impeachment then. And then, of course, COVID. And I think that's another thing we can't forget. We were at, last Wednesday, what could turn out to be the mother of all super spreader events. They were maskless. They were up close. We've already heard members of Congress who have tested positive for COVID-19 who were huddled inside the Capitol, and some other members refused to wear a mask even when they were in that close quarters, and there were riots outside. So I think that's also something that was really startling last week, and we were obviously had masks on and took great care, and things are okay so far. But you can't forget that. In the middle of all this, in the middle of yet another impeachment hearing, we are also still in the middle, and we hope we see an end soon, of a worldwide pandemic that is killing so many of our citizens.
This is a country in need of healing in so many ways, that's for sure. Martha Raddatz, thank you, as always.
You bet. You bet. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.